So welcome to my YouTube channel. That's what we call The Good Life. Today we're going to be talking about all the exciting things you could be sowing in the month of October. Now autumn is well and truly upon us, and the weather is definitely changing and things are definitely starting to die back and look a little bit different, but there's still lots and lots of amazing things you can sow this month, and I'm going to be going through some of the things that you can be sowing, I can be sowing, are one of my favourite things. I'm going to be showing you what I like to sow in October and how I plant it, so stay along to the end to make sure that you don't miss that. Now to get started, we're in the greenhouse and I'm going to be sowing a few things into little trays and pots. So let's take a look at what I'm doing now. So I've got some broad beans, so these are overwintering variety, which I grow most years and are really successful. In particular this year my overwintering broad beans did really well. Now one of my top tips with sowing broad beans is I soak them in water overnight. I then drain them and put them between some wet tissue and wait for them to sprout, and at that point when they've sprouted I then pop them into module trays like that. So I haven't actually soaked mine yet, but that's what I'm going to be doing. I then start them off in the module trays and then I plant them out when they've grown a little bit, because I find that the slugs and the snails attack them a lot otherwise, and they seem to do a little bit better if I start them off in little trays. But you can direct sow them if you want to, but definitely soaking overnight is definitely one of the things I would really recommend. So I will be soaking those overnight in the next week or two to get these underway. But what I'm going to be starting off today, and I've not actually done this before, but I have been given under great advice that overwintering cauliflowers is a really great way of avoiding some of the pests. So I'm going to pop some of these into a pot now to get this underway. Cauliflowers are one of the most favourite things in my household. My son absolutely adores cauliflower. So I'm always buying it because I can't grow enough and it can be quite difficult, or it's got a reputation for being quite difficult to grow. And I have grown it in the past, not with the greatest of success, so I'd love to hear from anyone who's grown it really well. So I've just got some core in there, so sometimes I just do core when I'm starting off from seed, sometimes I mix half core and half multi-purpose. When you're starting off from seed, despite what people say, core is a very good medium for starting seeds off in. And it's a really easy way. If you haven't got a bag of compost, if you've just got the blocks, you can just soak it and you've got some quick compost, which is exactly why I've got that there, because I've run out of compost. So I'm going to just sprinkle some seeds onto the core. So like I say, I'm going to start these off in module trays, and then when they've got a little bit bigger I'll pop them on, but I will keep them in my greenhouse until the spring. So I won't be planting these out into my allotment until the spring. So I'm never too sure. I'm not great at evenly putting seed out. Sometimes I'm really good and sometimes I'm really patient, because obviously we're going to thin these out anyway. I'd rather have too many and then pop them on and then share them with other people than not have enough. So we'll pop back in there what I've not started off, and hopefully we've got them all back in there. Now you can just cover that with a little bit of compost if you want to. But I prefer to use vermiculite, so I'm just going to pat it down just a wee bit. I do usually use my block, which is over here actually. Really handy to have a piece of wood to pat stuff down with. Very rudimentary, but it does what you need it to do. And then I just cover it with a little bit of core. So it just lets a little bit more light through, and especially for little seeds like things like cauliflower, you know, bigger seeds like beans and things, you just very much put them in the soil, but for little seeds I find the germination is just that little bit better. And of course one of the most important things is obviously to label what you've done, because you think you're going to remember, and trust me, you will not remember. So I've forgotten so many times what I've planted, and I see lots of posts on lots of different social media groups where people say, what's this? So please, whatever you do, make sure you label them, and I will obviously water these later. So obviously I didn't cover it with core, I covered it with vermiculite. So there we go, I will water that later, as my cameraman just reminded me. And let's move on to some other things you can be planting, and in a very similar way you can start off some spring onions. Now some people direct sow them into the ground. I never ever get very good germination, or they get eaten. I literally do not know what happens to my spring onions. I always start them off in exactly the same way I've just started off the spring onions, and I find they germinate much better, and I get the best spring onions that I've ever got. So spring onions can be something you can be starting off now. Obviously we talked about broad beans. You can obviously do your overwintering peas in exactly the same way as the broad beans as well, if you want to do some peas. So there's lots of different lettuce you can do this time of year, and they've all got really glamorous winter names like Winter Density and all those kinds of things, and there's all sorts of amazing stuff like Arctic King, Winter Gem. So there's quite a lot out there. There's obviously the Oriental ones, which I sowed last month, so I've got my Oriental ones coming along really nicely there. And stay tuned for my next video, because I will be potting some of these on, but I'm not going to be doing that in this video. I did put some of my very favourite lettuce. Now although these aren't technically an overwintering one, and they probably won't go right through the winter, one of my favourite things is salad bowl, and I started off a really beautiful row outside. They germinated absolutely amazingly, and then the slugs and the snails decided to eat them. So not wanting to be beaten, and knowing that it's a little bit too late, I'm going to be starting off some lettuce in exactly the same way I just sowed the other. I just sowed the cauliflower, so I'm going to do a little tray and I'm going to pop those out. And rocket is another really lovely one to do as well. There's the one that you have to keep sowing, but I generally do wild rocket because it keeps re-sowing itself, so that is a really lovely thing to do. And something else you can be doing in a pot is some radish. Now I did pop some out last month, so I'm not going to do any more, but in a pot you could start off some radishes, and then you can bring them in if it starts to get a little bit too cold. So if you've not got any radishes already started off, you can start some of those off in a pot and then maybe bring them into a porch, or if you've got a greenhouse like I've got. Now we're going to head up to the allotment, and I'm going to be sowing a few more things. Now before we go up there, if you're enjoying watching this video and you think you're getting some value, you can do something called Buy Me a Coffee. There is a link up on the screen, and there is one in the description. But if all you can do is like, comment and subscribe and tell me what you like best, I'll still be more than grateful. So we're now up at the allotment. Now before I move on to my favourite crop to sow in October, let's move on to my second favourite crop to sow in October. In good traditional English style, it's been absolutely tipping it down, and we've been sitting in the summer house waiting for it to ease off a bit, and it's still raining but not quite as heavy now. So I've got some overwintering onions here. Senchu, I probably don't pronounce that very well at all, so I assume that's some kind of Japanese onion, which are particularly good to plant this time of year, and I'm going to be popping these in the ground now. Onions are incredibly versatile, and I don't know about you, we use a tremendous amount of onions in our house, probably virtually every day, so it's a really great thing to grow, and it's really incredibly easy. Now while you can start them off from seed, I generally go for onion sets because they do make life just that little bit easier. I've dug over the ground and I've raked it over. I've not got my string out because it's a little bit wet, so I've just laid some canes down. They're just over 20 centimetres apart on the rows. I'm only going to put a couple of rows in today, so hopefully if I don't get completely rained off. Now while you can obviously use a trowel, or you can create the rows in many different ways, a dibber is really easy way of putting onion sets in, because they don't go down very far. They basically go down about as deep as the bulb, so you can just see the top. I don't have them protruding out, so I do take them right down basically to the level of the soil. So let me just do a couple so you can see exactly what I mean. So I don't bury them down deep, I don't have them sticking out at all. They are just below the level of the soil, like so. So incredibly easy. Don't sow them too close together because they can, it is more likely to get disease. So I guess about 20 centimetres apart between the rows as well. So I normally drop when I do a dibber as well, I drop a tiny bit of soil back into the soil so the roots have got something to stick to. They like well-drained soil, and if your soil isn't very well drained, you can start them off in module trays because they don't like claggy soil. That's where they are more likely to rot, and they do like quite good fertile soil, like most things do, to be fair, and pop them straight in like that. So they are incredibly easily. And whereas most things you need to water them, but if you're anything like it is in this country at the moment, it's going to get watered for me. So there we go. So just obviously the little root bit goes in the bottom and the pointed bit goes at the top, and you just pop it down. Like I said, just about soil level, maybe a little bit further down, but not too much. I generally don't backfill them. Actually, I know I do backfill these, correction. So I backfill them a little bit, but I don't bury them down deep. So I'll just push a little bit of soil in and around them, but I don't bury them down really deep. So they're just below the soil. So you could, if it was soft enough, you could just push them in. But if the soil's a little bit hard, you could damage them, and we don't want to do that. So I'm going to put the rest of these in later. I think we're in for another shower now. So I'm going to hide in the summer house. I'll be back out to plant my last crop. So we're now dodging the showers, and the last thing I'm going to be planting this month and in October, and my favourite thing is garlic. I have two varieties here. I have white Casablanca and I have pink Germador. So I'm now going to be planting these now. A bit like onions, we use such a lot of garlic in our house, and although you can buy it, there's nothing nicer than growing it yourself. So garlic can be a little bit tricky if your ground is quite hard and clayey, and I've got to be honest, my results of growing garlic have been a little bit mixed, which is why I'm going to plant them in my raised bed, because my ground can be a little bit claggy, especially up the top there. So I thought, seeing as I've got this lovely raised bed now, why not pop it in here and see if the results are any better. So obviously don't forget to like, comment and subscribe so you can see how my garlic does. So first thing to do is to break the bulb up. Now that's probably the trickiest thing to do, like so. So you just break it up into all the separate bulbs. You leave the skin on, because that does provide a little bit of protection. So while a little bit might come off, and don't get too het up about it, you leave the skin on, you don't peel them. So break them up, and as a general rule of thumb, the bigger the bulb, the better your results, is what they say. Whether that's true or not, I don't know. And there's a couple of types, there's soft neck and there's hard neck, and mine had a little stem going through the middle, so that tells me that it's hard neck. So it's really easy to tell what you've got. So we've got, if you've got a bit of an icky one, obviously don't plant that. So let's get rid of these little bits here. And I probably won't plant all the little small ones. So what you can do is plant the bigger ones, but the little ones, you can always take them home and use them. So don't forget that. Rather than waste them, take out the little tiny ones, and you can actually use them to cook with. So I'm going to put them to one side. So I'm going to put as many as I can in here, but a little bit like with garlic, I don't want to overcrowd them, because they don't like to be overcrowded, because they're more likely to get disease. And we don't want that, basically. Who wants disease on their crops? So let's break another one up. Again, it's another hard neck variety. Unlike a lot of vegetables, garlic actually really likes cold weather. It helps the bulbs form. So cold weather for garlic is actually quite essential, and some people that live in warmer climates actually put their bulbs in the fridge before they go to plant them, so they trick them that they've been in the cold, not in the freezer, just in the fridge. I don't need to do that in this part of the country, because we will probably have a nice cold winter, so I don't have to stress myself about that. But I know some people in some countries, that's what they have to do. So there you go, let's get rid of those bits, and the little ones I will cook with. So they're all broken up. Let's just get rid of all these little shell things here. And I'm now going to show you how I plant them, now that I've tidied them up a little bit. Now you can use a dibber or a trail. These are a little bit different to onion in the fact that you do plant them down a little bit deeper. Now the same with onions, you can plant them in module trays if you want to. So if you think you've got particularly claggy soil, you can again start them off in module trays and then plant them out. They're in here, this is very well drained, so I can either use a dibber or I can use a trowel. So if you use a dibber, you just poke them in. It's very easy, because this is so soft, I can really easily put them in. So they basically need to have enough soil to cover them, so the height of the garlic. So you've got the garlic there, so you want as much soil as the depth of the bulb roughly. So if we just pop that into the ground there like that. So they do go down quite a bit deeper. So they're about, I suppose, about 6 centimetres. Have about 6 6 centimetres of soil on the top of them, if I can get my words out, and you spread them out in a similar way as you would do the onions, so about 20 centimetres apart, like that, and then obviously cover them. It's probably best that I cover them after, otherwise you won't know where you put them in here. So I'm going to kind of do mine in a bit of a pinwheel. So what I've done, because I realised I was going to confuse myself, I've just laid them out so I know where I'm going to plant them, and I advise you to do exactly the same, so your spacing's about right. I never think my spacing's brilliant, by the way, if you're checking and you're measuring, but roughly about 20 centimetres apart. So just as a general rule of thumb, just make sure you plant them the right way round. It's really easy to get them around the wrong way. So obviously you've got the bottom bit there that the root comes out of, and then you've got the top little tip there at the top. So obviously the root goes at the bottom, the little pointed bit goes at the top. Like I said, obviously just a dibber or a trowel, or if it's soft enough, just push it down. So you basically want enough soil above it, which is about the height of the actual garlic itself. So you're planting them down a little bit deeper than the onions, and then obviously just cover them up. If it's soft enough, you could just poke them in, but you might not get them down far enough. So if I'm honest, a dibber is a really, really good investment. And even I check what way round the bulb is, because they're quite similar with the shape, so it's very easy to get them around the wrong way. I'm sure I've poked the odd one in around the wrong way before, and if you put them around the wrong way, they've got to grow round themselves, which would be really, really awkward. So I hope you've enjoyed this video. If you've got an abundance of crops like I have, I've got a video on dehydrating my vegetables. There's a link up on the screen and one in the description.